when people are thinking about creating a presentation, maybe it would be my next tip. And it's not so much the technicality of delivering it. It's really important to keep coming back to simplicity. And myself included, I tend to make things more complicated than they need to be. But if you kind of use these two frameworks, which have been really useful to me, I think you can create a much stronger structure. So the first one, and one that you've told me, is really great for the beginning phases of brainstorm, which is, what do you want your audience to think, feel, and do after listening to you speak about this topic? And it's very simple. So after listening to this, what are the emotional feelings you want somebody to have felt? What do you want them to have thought, right? And then what do you want them to have felt? And then the most important part is what do you want them to go do with that information? Because I'll say this, and I did say this in my last presentation, but I get to a certain point in a presentation that I'm listening to, and I'm like, okay, so what? So what do I do with this information that you've just given to me? How can I make this applicable in my life? So if you don't like think, feel, do, another way to think about this is there should be a what, a so what, and a now what part of your presentation. You deliver, you give them a so what, why this is important and why they should care about it. And now a now what? So how can you now use this information to make you a better leader, a better coach, a better teacher, etc. And, if you can't answer those questions about your presentation, I think it's going to waffle. You're going to waffle. You're going to go a lot of places, but it's not going to be as effective as it necessarily could be.
Yeah. And I think, I really hope that everybody listening paid attention to that. One main point I really want you guys to take from Allie there is, and this feeds into the next tip I'll give you, is you do have to think, so what? We often think about, oh, this is what I want to say. This is what I want to present on. And that's fine. But then you'll end up going down this rabbit hole of adding more info, because you're letting passion lead you, as opposed to an actual authentic and strategic pre-assessment. And that is part of what Allie's talking about. So what I mean by pre-assessment, and it complements Allie here, is before, let's say today you got contracted to speak. Somebody reached out, they want you to speak about something, or maybe you're even just trying to sharpen the saw. You've never been asked to speak, but you're volunteering to speak somewhere because it's a goal to start speaking. Either way, it doesn't matter whether you're paid or not. This is where you need to start well before you even have a topic, or at the very least, if you've just picked a topic, you need to ask yourself, what do others need to know? Like, what do they really need to know? So if you're going to talk about, and again, I'm making this up, if you're in meteorology and you're going to talk about different kinds of clouds, what it means, right? You have to think, what do people actually need to know? They don't need to know every little bit of the atomic structure of these clouds, right? They need some simple take-home strategic, like Allie said. What do you want them to think, feel, and do? What's the so what? What do they need to know? I've given a talk on plyometrics to more of a strength and conditioning crowd. They need to know a little bit of a refresher on anatomy and physiology. They need to know sample exercises and what classifications they might fit into, so they have an order and a structure. And then they need to know what not to do so they can help people avoid injury. Those are some examples of what they might need to know. When I speak on behavior change or communication, let's say I'll think of a topic. I have a talk called The Impact of Influence. The whole goal of the talk is the fact that we think we're rational creatures, but in reality, there's a wide range of subconscious things that influence our behavior. It's what makes us wonky. It's what makes us do things that are completely irrational. And these things are embedded into environment, different design elements and music and all these things. And marketers know this. So what I need the audience to know is that there are multimodal factors that make us behave in irrational ways that we often don't even recognize. And then I need them to know not just what's the cool science behind that, but what they can do about it or how they can leverage the good aspects of that, right? Those are examples of what they need to know. I also need to think about what they might already know. You need to give your audience credit. You need to give your audience credit and make sure you are never talking down to them. Now, that's very difficult at times because you also don't want to assume too much knowledge. And that's a delicate balance. And that's why there is an art to this and why it takes skill and training and refinement, because you need to know if you are coming off a certain way. That's why a big part of great communication is understanding human perception, which we've talked about on our online courses and at our apprenticeship. if you don't understand why people perceive certain things the way they do, then you're more likely to have your message or your key points misinterpreted. But for now, just think about what might they already know, what is obvious, and even acknowledge that. You can still include what they might already know. If I talk about plyometrics, I understand people are going to know that tendons are involved and muscles are involved. I get that. So I might say, hey, you guys know this, or just a brief refresher, not to insult your intelligence, but let's go back to basics for a moment because it highlights key points, right? So you can acknowledge that. Two more things. You have to assess what you think their ability to make sense of what they're about to hear is. There are a lot of times that I read new, interesting research, and it's fascinating to me. But for somebody that might not be as into that subject, it might be way too much. So you have to think, okay, that is full on, this might be inappropriate to some, that is full on intercourse. If I go all in there, maybe I need to start with a little bit of seduction and things like that first, and some simple conversation. And I'm not going to apologize for what I said there. It is what it is, and everybody gets the point. The point is you want to give everybody all the information, all this, but you have to think, can they make sense of it? That's why you need to utilize, and we grade people on this with our evaluation, right, Allie? Their use of analogies, their use of metaphors, to your point, the use of story, talking in color, right? Those are huge literary devices and rhetorical devices that they need to use. And then finally, and you mentioned this, what do you want to feel? The potential emotional impact of the material. You gave a talk recently that some might view as controversial in the strength and conditioning field. And it is. It's controversial because it's common sense, and it's kind of this wake up point that the field needed to hear about what the definition of being a coach really is about, and how to not singularly identify themselves, and how to not be scared to take a leap. We have people right now in this episode that are in 20 different professions and all identify as a coach, a leader, or a teacher in some capacity. So you want them to feel conflicted. You want them to feel that way. So just talking about my point there that complements Allie's is do a pre-assessment and think about all those things about the audience first before you think about what you want to say. All right, Allie, you have one more. Go ahead.